Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Social Work Radio with me, your host Vince Beard. Once again, we are joined by Matt B. Matt B, happy Christmas my friend and all the best, happy new year. How have things been in the few weeks since you were last aboard the good ship SWR?
Well, thank you for having me back. Things have been busy just with Christmas holidays and children, and I wrote about it in the magazine. It's just been childcare all the way for me. So it's been really nice spending time with them, and it'll be nice to get back to work. I'm still not at work yet, so my first day back is tomorrow. Nice,
and we've got we've got it decorated for Christmas here for you to keep the Christmas vibe going.
I don't want any more Christmas. I'm done with Christmas.
I've bombarded you. I've ambushed you with some more. I gave you a Christmas present as well as you arrived today.
You did. I've got my Christmas card and a Christmas present,
and I got you a book that said "Write a Friend."
Yes,
but you thought it said "Write a Fiend."
I did think it said that. Yeah.
What would you rather be? Would you rather be a friend or a fiend?
Well, definitely a friend. And
a fiendishly good friend
and an average writer. Yes.
I must imagine that on your gravestone there. Friend and average writer. Here lies Matt B, average writer.
He came, he went, he left some articles about social work.
He left a lot of love along the way, my friend.
Yeah. So all I've been doing is lots and lots of time with my young kids.
Nice.
So that has been nice, but like I say it has been pretty full on. They're at that age where it doesn't stop. You're
looking forward to going back to work?
Yes. I can't wait. Because I enjoy my work. I just, I'm keen. So tomorrow morning I'll be there first. I'll be there as soon as the doors open. I'll be running in like the Boxing Day sales. I'll be at my desk.
That's good though. It's good to have that enthusiasm for work, even if it comes through a highly stressed Christmas. It's good to be looking, because many people won't be looking forward to going back to work. Many people have started already and find it quite difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean I wrote about it in that piece, and I'm really lucky that I love my job. So even when I'm not there, I like to keep reading about it. Very keen to get back, and it's lovely to be back doing another podcast as well.
Find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Do you think you've found that quite? Have you been close to that?
I wouldn't go that far. It still feels like
you like your job. Love on a scale from detest to love. You might be on about 7 or 8. Fondness.
Yeah, I'm getting there because every job comes with bits you maybe you're not so keen on. So I wouldn't say I love all the paperwork, but if you have more good days than bad, then that's you're all right if that's the case. Yes.
Yeah. Far more good days than bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I really enjoy what I do these days. So I enjoy that. I enjoy this, and my childcare, if I can limit that to the point where I stay sane, that's quite good too.
I'm going to remember that. My childcare, if I can limit that to the point where I stay sane, that's good too.
Yeah, I can't watch any more Peppa Pig or
you're all peppered out.
I am. And what's the other stuff they're into at the moment?
Bluey?
Yes.
I like Bluey. I like Bluey. I enjoy personally doing it. I would never watch it if I was by myself, but when the kids have got Bluey on, I'm all right with that.
You can't do 3 hours of Bluey though.
No. You'd be blue after 3 hours of Bluey. You'd be turning blue. The ambulance would be out for you.
Yeah. Anyway, this is all about me. How are you? And what's the latest for you?
Good. I had a very good Christmas. Good time was had by all. Once again, I overindulged my children. I think we have to be careful as parents, and it's something I find that I am sometimes at risk of giving my children the Christmas I didn't have.
Okay.
And I sometimes realise afterwards when I look at all the stuff they aren't playing with, I'm like, was I buying it for them or was I buying it for me?
Well, that's the argument I was having in my household for the whole month coming up to Christmas.
But I wasn't buying it for me in the sense it was something I was used. Was it cathartic for me? Because, when I was younger, a very vivid memory of mine was looking through the Argos catalogue and listing all the things I would like if my family had the money to get those things. And now it's like I kind of have to rein back a little bit from my children. So yeah, they had an amazing time, but I've resolved that. It's taught me a lesson. I've learnt from it. So my daughter's birthday is coming up in February. So rather than getting her something, I'm getting her an experience, and I'm going to take her to Comic Con. So London, they have the national, like the UK's Comic Con is in London in at the Excel Centre at the end of May. So I've said, right, for this year, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you an experience. So we're going to dress up. She's into Pokemon, so I'm going to be Professor Oak. Are you aware of Pokemon?
No, well, I know of it. I've never seen it.
I'm going to dress up Professor Oak. She's going to be Misty, and we're just debating what my girlfriend's going to dress up as. My daughter wanted to dress up as a Pokemon. I think it might be a bit much. So we're debating, should she be a Pokemon? I'm thinking about Team Rocket. But if you don't know about Pokemon...
But is this like a conference thing that you go to? Conference might be the wrong word, but...
It is. Yeah, it is. That's what con stands for. It's a comic conference.
And do you travel there in character?
Well, no, because I'll be driving down the M1, and I'm not. I mean, look, I'm a safe driver, but if I did happen to get into an accident, I wouldn't like to explain why I'm dressed up as a Pokemon trainer, why my daughter's dressed up as a Pokemon trainer, my girlfriend is in the front seat dressed up as Jigglypuff. That might cause accidents, to be honest.
The police arriving would probably jump to some conclusions about fault, wouldn't they?
Let's move on. So it was a good Christmas, and I've learned a lesson. Don't buy too many things. So in future, it's going to be experiences. Because that's how I live my life. Is I'd rather have experience than things. So I'm not sure why I don't pass on that same ethos to my children. Listeners, viewers, this will be a show that you'll catch on YouTube. Hope you've had a wonderful Christmas as well. Thank you for all your messages. Thank you for continuing to engage with us over the Christmas period. Obviously, you've commented on lots of the articles we've had out over at mysocialworknews.com and on our Facebook page and on our Instagram and Twitter and on my LinkedIn. So happy Christmas. Good luck to you all throughout 2024 and many happy returns. So Matt, should we crack on and talk about this week's podcast topic? Are you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Right. So our topic this week is social workers are far more valuable than we believe ourselves to be. Now, this topic comes off the back of an article that we published last week, which had the title, Social Workers Predicted to be Amongst Most In-Demand Employees of 2024. Some research that came out from the recruiter Hayes said that social workers will be amongst the most in-demand employees of 2024 due to the increased and complex care needs across the UK. The quote from the chief executive of Hayes says, "The roles featured on our list are at the top of employers' wish lists up and down the country, as many struggle not only to attract staff but also to retain them due to high competition for skills." And I was thinking, Matt, I was looking at this and I was thinking, this chimes with what we know already about the 20% vacancy rate. You and I, in our, we've had over close to 30 years social care experience between the two of us. We've obviously seen this. We know that, social workers are in demand. But as a profession, do we know just how valuable we are? What do you think? Do you think as social workers we know our worth?
I think it's really individual. So some social workers clearly know what they're worth. And this is, we'll probably get into this later. It can make the power dynamics quite difficult in teams, depending on whether everyone in the team is aware of that. So I think some people really struggle with that, and some people are quite assertive with that. I think culturally, in terms of the whole profession, I think we have a tendency to get walked over a lot. So we will... If you think about someone who really knows their worth, they'll be paid correctly, they'll have the right paying conditions, they'll be treated with that kind of respect. And actually we have a culture of working much more, we work for free. What does that say about how we value ourselves if we'll give our time away freely, which we do? I think it's going to be a really interesting issue. It's hard to cover in one kind of summary at the beginning. But I'm really looking forward to exploring this in a bit more detail. That's
why we have a full show, my friend. You said there about the vacancy rate. Obviously, I discussed it as well. The latest figures. So in the UK, we have the children's social workforce. That's a mouthful, isn't it? The children's social workforce, a double work, a double shift. This comes out every February, so we are due to get the update to this next month. But the last update, which came out on the 23rd of February 2023, it's a yearly update, it's an annual census, showed that 1 in 5 of all child protection or children's social work jobs in general was empty. It's a 20% vacancy rate. Is it similar in adult services? I know you don't work directly in frontline adult social work anymore, but is that a similar theme? Do adults struggle to recruit as badly as children's sectors do?
Well, I've done some research.
Oh, fire away, my friend.
You send the notes and I do a little bit of background work. So there is some statistics I've got here.
Yeah.
So apparently in adult services for adult social workers, we're at 11.6% vacancy rate. But that's going up. So in 2020 it was 7.5%.
Wow. That's a hell of a jump in 3 years.
Yeah, then it was 9.5% in 2021, and we're now at 11.6%. So it's going up really quickly.
What do you... Does it say why that is, or do you have a view on why that is?
It doesn't say... I mean, COVID's probably had an impact in terms of... We know that's really decimated. So the big issue in adult social care is actually the home support and domiciliary care workforce and residential care. So who's doing actual home support? There's massive problems there in terms of there's not enough staff to deliver the care. So that's going to have a knock-on effect in terms of stress levels for social workers. Because as a social worker, you're trying to get the care commissioned to look after people. If you don't have the carers, you're going to really, really struggle. I wrote about this in the magazine a couple of months ago. There's a guy in Northern Ireland who basically will be without care. He could live at home, but he can't because they haven't got the carers to go visit him. So his choice at that time was to go into a residential home, even though I think he was 40 and he had some physical disabilities and he was totally able to live independently at home with some support. That wasn't available. So I think, the actual adult social care workforce, it's 1.6 million staff. It's really big. It's close to the size of the NHS, and they've got 150,000 vacancies there.
So, wow. When you add it through, that percentage, you think 11%, when you think of the actual figure, 150, where are we going to find these people?
Well, this is where, Brexit's really difficult.
Yeah.
And, we were trying to get lots of workers from abroad. We still are. But in terms of the social workers who work in this sector, I think that probably explains a little bit why so many are leaving, or the vacancy rate seems to be rising, because what can you do? You come into this role to try and support people, but you don't have the carers to commission.
That must be terribly stressful that you've got the funds, you've got the ability, you've got the will, but you simply do not physically have the staff to do that work.
No, that's it. And I think that causes a lot of psychological harm for people, because they come into the profession to help, and in theory you can deliver that support, but in practice you can't. And I think that puts a lot of a burden on someone. So that might be why we're seeing that. I mean, that's got a lot worse since COVID, so that might be why.
Why has it got worse since COVID, do you think?
I think, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I've gone into that, but I've read it enough times now in other places to go, this has been a predominant issue since COVID's really arrived.
Is it a case, do you think, of people reevaluating their careers, people maybe losing loved ones, people being scared of the impact on their health of having to go and do home visits? Is it a multitude of those things? We
had a real problem in COVID itself. So in COVID, at that time, there were real difficulties in making sure everyone had the right PPE, that people were working in the right conditions.
Yeah, I remember those times.
The actual illness rate within home carers and in death rates actually were a lot higher than in the NHS, even though they were performing very similar roles. And that's, again, when we're talking about being valued, if you want to think about being valued, home support workers are incredibly undervalued.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And we could see that in COVID in terms of the numbers who felt they still had to come to work in conditions that really weren't safe.
Yeah.
So I think that has had a knock-on effect. So it's definitely, I mean, we often talk about this children's social work and adult social work, although they have similar, we work under the same umbrella, they're very different roles and very different issues. But our vacancy rate wouldn't seem to be anywhere near as high as what you were talking about, at 20%. That really is astonishing. When you were sent through the notes, I thought that I was looking around, I couldn't find any comparison, but I couldn't find any of the professions
it's high
with that. But it's not new. One of the things on the notes was like, what's your reaction to it? My reaction when I saw this was that I've read this before.
Yes. It is creeping up. It's creeping up. It is creeping up, percentage points by the year. But it isn't new. There was always been this issue, and most of the concerns that we share, that they worsen. There's sometimes ebb and flow. There's a bit of an increase, but it is never fully solved. So We are in demand. I would say we are certainly in demand as social workers. We are valuable, and if we know our worth, like you said, sometimes it'd be difficult. I think sometimes people can know their worth too much, which one can create a problem, because I've certainly been the manager in some teams before, mention no names here, where some workers have had an attitude, well, I can just go and get a job tomorrow. So you either have to tolerate my substandard practices or accept my time off or accept that I'm not going to answer the phone and do these visits, or I can go. And I think that speaks more about the individual than the profession. I think if you've got that mentality, I think that's a personal, I would say it's a defect or a flaw, to be honest. The person who was feeling that way may see it was a means of, it was strong, and it was a way of protecting themselves. But I think it can be difficult either way. Certainly undervaluing yourself can be very difficult, because you can be tread all over, you can not know your worth, and you can end up in dead-end jobs where you tread poorly. Equally, I think we have to be careful about going too much the other way, where you think you are superior to the extent where it impacts on the care that your clients receive. But in general, do you think social workers are valued by employers, government and society? What do you think?
Okay, so I think it's quite interesting. So I think from my personal experience, in terms of employers, on an individual level, most of the places I've worked, I'd say I felt valued by the manager, by the team around me. Person by person, whoever I met, I felt this person does value what I do.
Good.
Like, it was quite rare for me to come across this situation where it wasn't. But culturally, when you put all these people together, I didn't feel valued. As a collective. Something about when you put all these individual people together, even though it's very hard to pin down, you go, we all actually quite like each other and we all get along, we all do a great job. But collectively, it goes wrong. Like, you don't get the right... I mean, the thing that always made me feel really undervalued was the fact my time wasn't valued. Like, I could just be given things to do that would take so long to do. And you thought, well, if you actually valued what I was doing, you would make this easier for me to do, or more efficient. Or if I said, you know what, this actually needs to be a bit better.
So you're valued as a worker, but not a person. Your personal time isn't valued.
No, professional time. At the end of the day, if you buy my time, you're buying 37 hours of my time, in theory. Okay, so if you value that, you'd want to use that time as carefully as possible. And actually, you felt like you're not valuing this time at all, because you can just give me anything you want to get done.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of the work, I think we do value ourselves, but we value our clients much more. Mm-hmm. And the issue is that you end up going, if I'm really going to express how much I value my clients to make sure they're okay, I have to do more than 37 hours work to get this done.
Yeah.
And I
difficult.
think, and if you're a really caring employer, if you're very much valuing everyone, you would look at that and go, that's not right.
Yes.
And actually, that's not how it is. You know, it's hard to meet the person who's in charge of this to say you're the person who's doing this, because actually, if you talk to every individual, they'll go, well, that's not right.
But how many hours are they working? When you meet the person in charge, how many extra hours a week are they working?
A bit more research for you here.
Give me more.
So that's from some studies that were done by some of the universities around Manchester. I think it was the University of Manchester did this. They surveyed 5,500 social workers. Mm-hmm. They found actually the further you go up the management chain, the more hours they work.
Yeah.
They're actually working more hours than social workers.
So if you're looking at a director of children's services, probably working 60, 70 hours a week?
Well, social workers working about 10 hours extra a week.
Yeah.
And this actually got worse the higher up you went.
So managers might be 10, 11, 12 service managers. So the higher up so once you get to director level, you are working a lot.
I imagine it actually comes down at director level. I don't know. It didn't break it down to that level.
But in terms of in the sort of the ones that are involved in frontline decisions and actually in the departments.
But I think that's the culture. That's that thing. Like if you're in a senior position and you're doing that, you might not see that it's particularly wrong that everyone else is doing it as well.
It's just accepted.
And I think that at heart does undervalue your staff and also their personal lives, because how are they going to have a personal life if they're spending all their time working and then trying to recover from working?
So I go up the management chain, and this is something I've thought many times. Obviously, I've been a manager before. I've been an assistant team manager, but my managerial role, I kind of started out by doing a favour. Sounds strange, that, but like, you know,
but loads of managers do.
Yeah. It was literally the service manager, really good guy, Ben, hell of a decent guy. You know, we needed to fill a managerial vacancy quite short notice. He's like, you know, can you help us out here? I said, I'll give it a shot. I didn't say it myself. we used to speak. You were quite surprised when you found out I'd become a manager, weren't you?
Yes.
Surprised being probably a polite way of putting it.
You've moved to the dark side.
Yeah. But I liked it, but it wasn't for me long term. And yes, look, there was a wage increase. There's the prestige that comes with it. But the best thing about it was the experience. It made me a better social worker for seeing what managers do.
Yeah.
It certainly did. But if I was to break down the hours that I was working additionally, I was earning less per hour on a higher rate because I was working more. And given I had no will to progress or to move further, I'm just not sure it was for me.
And I think that's the point. I think in terms of being valued, I think individually, yes, people do value each other, but the system that we work within undermines that. And I think that's the core issue.
Does our society value us? Do societies value social workers? If we were to compare ourselves to nurses, firefighters, the police force.
No, not in the same way. But then I don't think society, it's like anything. Most people in society don't have contact with social workers. They don't think about social workers. Yes. It's not particularly in the media. So the only time they're probably going to think about it is when something goes wrong. Because that's the only other time.
And you're only going to get a bad story.
Yeah. So, and I don't think that's unique to social work. I think that's about pretty much any profession. You know, you don't generally think about it unless you're directly involved with it. Nurses in particular have a slightly different take on it because of COVID and all. You know, what we went through there, we've really now valued the healthcare system and professionals in that field much more. Do
you think that's kept though, or do you not think that's waned? Do you think that will sustain?
Probably not. It won't sustain indefinitely, so it will wane. I don't know if it has.
Because the narrative of COVID's changing more and more, isn't it? You're getting more and more people who are coming out against vaccines and the mandates, and you know, I'm not saying that the whole narrative's changed. I think more people are still in support of what happened, but I am certainly seeing a lot more messages coming out into the mainstream and being more widely accepted that were once seen as conspiracy theories about COVID.
But I think if you remember the public, you have a very simple narrative in your head about a nurse.
Help for heroes.
Yeah. So you make sick people better. Yes. You know, this has to be a good thing. You have to be a good person. If you are a member of the public and you don't know much about social work, it's divisive.
Well, what messages do you have? You have messages. You've got TV programs about nurses. You've got stories about them. You probably know a nurse because the profession is so much wider, and certainly you've had support from a nurse.
Yeah.
With social work being a targeted service, it generally, you know, particularly in children's services, the vast majority of people do not want a social work. It is not voluntary.
People don't know what to make of it. I mean, we've just had Christmas, and you know, we've met up with people. We've met new people because our child's just started school, so we've been along with her to some things, and we've met some of the parents, so it's lots of chances to meet new adults that you've not met before. And it's interesting, I've had those conversations with people over Christmas, what do you do? And I've gone social work, and you can see them go, right,
how do I take this? What do I say?
And you think, I don't know what's in your head. Like, I don't know, if I was a nurse or a doctor, I would understand probably what you're thinking, but as a social worker, it's really dependent on what their personal experience is.
And this is why it's quite common for people to lie about being a social worker. Not necessarily lie, but not tell the truth. I know many social workers who, when asked that question by strangers, will say, I work for the council, and hopefully leave it there. Because you roll the dice. You know, if somebody's had a bad experience with social workers, they've had a bad experience. And those bad experiences are potentially far more common given the involuntary nature of it.
But this is where we're going to get to it, but I think you need a union and you need people who are going to talk more highly about what social workers do, because there's so much great work social workers do, but the public hear nothing about it. And a lot of it is about harm that never happens because of what social workers have done. And because that doesn't really get reported on, we don't really talk about it a great deal, it doesn't get attached to the social work profession in the public's mind. You know, it's only about harm that does happen that we fail to prevent. And that means that it is tainted in terms of how we view it. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be reported, because of course it should. But I think that's what we're missing. If you want to sort of think, how does social work get that public recognition? How do you get that message across to the society? You need a body to actually put that message out.
But we've got that. We've got the Social Work Union. We've got Basw, who will tell us they have 20,000 members. And, you know, they've got a lot of, I quite often see them when there's a social work news story. You'll get people from Basw on the television, We've got this, Matt.
Have we? So,
pretty sure there is an organisation that exists called Basw. Otherwise, I don't know who I'm paying my £40 a month to.
I know of it. You know of it. People
I'm a member of it. I am a member of Basw.
People listen to the podcast will know of it, but people who aren't social workers, what do they know of it?
Look, I'm going to say it as it is. I'm not going to hold back on this one. I was trying to be diplomatic there, but no, I'm going to say it. I am bitterly disappointed by my union. I'm bitterly disappointed by my association of social workers. I've had fallings out with Basw before, some members of Basw that I may have not always got on as well as I could have with, and I believe that's on me because of my frustrations. And sometimes I think because I know some people in Basw and I've been quite close with them and I've worked with them before, I think that can sometimes make me pull my punches, but I'm not going to do that, Matt. I'm going to say it as it is. I am bitterly disappointed by a union and our association. They have a very safe and steady way of doing things that they do not deviate from. How many times have you heard Basw, Matt, say, Basw call on the government? How many times have you heard Basw call on the government in your 15 years as a social worker?
People don't bother calling on the government, don't do it. Open letters, don't bother, right? Marches or whatever. These things aren't effective. They don't change anything. It doesn't make a difference.
Even if you've got 100 signatories of that open letter?
What does it matter?
Exactly.
What does it matter?
Exactly.
And this is the problem. One of the questions said, does the government value social workers? Well, probably not. But at the end of the day, why should the government actually do that? Because the government's busy doing whatever's in the headlines. It's always responding and firefighting and working with whatever's in the headlines is what
they've got bigger problems. They've got bigger problems.
If you want the government to value social workers, it takes you back to that union position of who's making the government care.
What about a focus group? Do you not think a Basw focus group or a steering committee? A steering committee. Could a steering committee not get things sorted out, mate?
No, well,
steering committee.
you just got a stick and you're prodding me. So
I'm just firing out all these buzzwords. Yeah. But you right. I say this facetiously, but these things, if you're high up in Basw, these committees, that's what Basw is. Basw is open letters, campaigns that essentially mean, can you tweet these things and do a hashtag, steering committees, focus groups, tweets and calling on the government to action, and a survey that's sent out once a year where the views of social workers are regurgitated. I've been a member of Basw for the best part of a decade. I've been on and off, but I've been probably, if you combine them, probably over 10 years. There's a couple of times where my membership's lapsed and I haven't rejoined because I've become frustrated. I would be hard-pressed to find one meaningful difference they've ever made to my life as a social worker or the life of anyone I've known. Am I being cynical there, or is that just the way it is?
I mean, I'm being careful because I don't want to go in too hard on Basw because I've got no experience. I mean, I was never a member of them. I never actually joined because the person who was going to recruit me just said, here's how much you pay, and I can't remember anything else that they actually told. And I said, I didn't understand what the advantage was. It wasn't sold to me in a particular, it was just everyone else is in it, you need to be in it. And I have a
collective action.
Yeah, I have a sort of, didn't really fit my mentality very well. But in any event, I don't see it being effective. I mean, I've got to be fair because I used to write for the
As did I. Yes. As did I. I was on my local Basw. I was a member of my local Basw branch in the northeast.
No, I used to write for the magazine, but I got into difficulty when people found out I wasn't actually a member of Basw. But I was writing for them.
Amazing. I can imagine that would probably potentially be a problem.
No, I did. I wrote a really an in-depth feature. I'll tell you this story. So I wrote an in-depth feature all about religious views and things like that, and how we need to take them into account when we work with people. Very
fair point.
And I had some people to interview, and I interviewed some academics, and they said, "This is great. We should put a conference together around this, right? Or a seminar." And I thought, right,
exactly the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah. And then they said, let's put this together. And then they mentioned to me, I said, I'm not a member of Basw. And as soon as they said that, they said, we're not doing it then. Because I was just a freelance writer doing a feature for them. But I think this is the problem. I mean, Basw, my experience of it, and I'm going to be really careful on this, it seemed to be very inward looking.
It is.
It didn't really seem to connect with the wider world. And what you need is a union that actually will connect with the wider world to say, here's the issues in social work, and here's what we would recommend the actions that need to be taken, and to communicate that in a meaningful way. Like open letters don't do that. And this is again, I mean, I've written about this as well, the chief social workers, these roles, I'm still unclear as to what they do. And I mean, they're meant to intercede with the government. They're meant to actually make some meaningful changes for us. We've been around for like 10 years, I thought. We've been in post for a while. Hard to quantify what it's actually changing in terms of, does the government respect social workers or value social work? What's actually the outcome of these positions? I'm not really sure.
I'm going to say something here, and I think a damning indictment of our association and our unions and our own appointed people is the fact that the person in my 11 years as a social worker who has made the most change in our profession isn't even a trained social worker. I would hazard that's Josh McAllister. Josh McAllister, in thinking about children specifically, Josh McAllister set up Frontline, which revolutionised the way that social workers are recruited. It revolutionised the model. It brought on a new model of training, a new breed of cohorts, and essentially a brand new way of doing things. I've known several people who've come through the Frontline model, many of whom are very good friends of mine, a man in particular called Brad, still very close to him, one of my best male friends in social work. Then Josh McAllister goes on to lead the Care Review, which is going to have significant changes to the way that child protection social work is done. This man isn't a trained social worker. He comes from a teaching background. But his mother is a social worker, and he saw that he could implement the Teach First model, which was already training teachers via a fast-track route, and bring that into social work. And he became passionate for social work, and it's obviously led him to working with other things. For me, it's a sad indictment, not necessarily that we don't have the skills within social work, we don't have the ability, that we don't have a vessel to steer that. Because like you say, and it's not just Basw, it's not just a social work union, but many of our organisations within social work are very insular. I think we can harbour an us versus them mentality. We can hunker down, everybody else is to blame. Oh, we're not going to work with the government because they're conservative. Well, the Tories have been in power for a decade and a half now. What are you going to do? You have to deal with that. I remember once I got significant criticism from sectors from my own profession because I wrote a piece for the Daily Mail. I wrote an article for the Daily Mail which was about challenging the portrayal of social workers on a popular British soap opera called EastEnders. And people, we should have wrote for The Guardian instead. My position was, well, if I'm writing for The Guardian, whose mind am I going to change? Because everybody who's reading The Guardian's already going to be listening to me. We can't just have an echo chamber where we speak to ourselves and speak to people that agree with us.
But even if you write for I've written for The Guardian. If you write for The Guardian,
yeah,
even though you think I'm already writing towards people who probably have a similar viewpoint.
Exactly.
But it's amazing how much fighting there is in the comments underneath the article. Because actually within social work, it is insular, but everyone seems to be fighting with everyone else. So.
But all that time we're spent fighting amongst ourselves, what are we not doing? Making meaningful change. This is my frustration. This is why I rarely engage on Twitter and I rarely reply to any comments online. Because for me, every single second we waste debating amongst ourselves about the right thing to say, what's beyond the pale right now, what's the correct terminology to use. We're not talking about obviously things that are blatantly offensive, sexist, racist and so on. We're talking about, you've got to say this in a certain way. You shouldn't be representing social work. You shouldn't be saying this. You shouldn't be doing that. Establishing who holds authority within a very small sphere. Every second we spend doing that is a second away from our personal lives, our clients, our work, and making a difference in our profession.
Well, I'll give you an example of this from a couple of years ago. I think you may have spoken to the person involved with it, actually. There's the Panorama undercover social worker.
I did an interview with her for a rival magazine.
Yeah, I think...
I did, actually. I had a good connection with her. I knew her personally. We spoke quite a lot. Yeah, so the undercover social worker.
The undercover social worker. So this is a case in point. This would have been about 2016, I think.
It was 2016, well remembered.
Yeah. So... she went with the name of Vicky, I think. But yeah. she went and worked...
I've got to be careful not to use her real name, but Vicky was the name that
was what was reported.
It was in Birmingham.
So she went undercover into that children's service.
Yeah, it was Birmingham Children's Services.
And this got portrayed on Panorama, and it showed all the things that social workers had been saying, these are the problems that we experience. Mm-hmm. It highlighted it really clearly, all about some infighting, some confusion about what was meant to be going on, real difficulties. I think they had a multi-agency room with police officers, but they couldn't work out how they could share information. And it highlighted all the difficulties and had social workers talking unguardedly about these are the problems I'm having and I'm really struggling and I can't cope. And this went out on primetime television, and it was an opportunity to show society this is what social workers do and this is how difficult it is, and this is the support that they need to be able to actually protect vulnerable people in society. When that went out, the whole social work community went in uproar, not about we need to actually highlight this and get better support, but about a social worker going undercover. This was the big issue, and social workers fell out with each other, and there was loads of conflict around social workers violated the trust of other social workers, and just basically it was a big free-for-all with everyone fighting with each other. And I think that's one of the key issues, is that it's about having a unified voice. And actually there's a lot of dissent within social work about not just what we're trying to say, but how do we say it and what the rights and wrongs are. And again, I wrote about that as well, and I just went, how disappointing that we've missed an opportunity here to actually highlight the things that the programme was meant to try and highlight. We didn't actually make good on that. So I think some of this is about us ourselves as social workers and how we communicate with each other.
I had a front row seat to that story. The reason I connected with the social worker who went undercover was before the TV programme went out. I moderate a large social work group on Facebook called Social Work World. We've got about 55,000 members. People started outing this social worker. People started posting posts. Her own team members felt aggrieved, and people that she worked alongside while she was stationed in Birmingham as an agency social worker started outing her. So I was taking these posts down, but I found that she was also a member of the group, and I messaged her and said, just by the way, just to let you know, I'm not sure this is safe for you. People are naming you as this person. She says, thank you for this. Yes, I am this person. And I said, look, it's up to you, but I'm certainly not wanting a favour back because I've done this. But if you would like, given your side of the story, given what's coming out, I'm happy to speak to you anonymously. She agreed to that. We ran the story that day. So again, this was when I used to work for a different magazine. Same magazine, you used to work for them as well. That's how I met you, Matt, because we both used to write for them. So I ran that story, so I had a front row seat to not only what she was going through, but also that very, very strange insular mentality. Because you're right, that documentary, that for me, that showed nothing that was alien to any social worker in the world. That for me was, yes, let's show these things, let's make change. But what was our profession's reaction? Rather than to make change, it was to isolate her, push her out. I had a similar experience to me in a certain way. I used to write under a different name and do a podcast under a different name. And I had a very, very high figure, very high profile figure very quickly. I had millions of shares and likes and engage. I had a massive reach due to content that I used to share and write about. For a while, I was kind of the in thing. I was popular, everybody wanted to like me, and everybody got on well with me, and I had lots of offers. Most of the well-known figures in social work I've had dealings with and I've got to know over time. When it became quite clear that I was not going to bend my agenda to other people and not use my platform to advance their ideas, well, actually this was just me, and I was writing what I felt like and sharing what I felt like because that's what made it authentic. I no longer became fashionable, and then I was othered. It can happen. We're going to end on this topic though. We've talked about these issues, we've gone far and wide, we've had some very interesting conversations about some related areas there. What can we do to increase our professional self-worth? No, we've called on Basw, and that's one. We've called on Basw. How ironic. How ironic. Basw calling the government. We are calling on Basw. What can we do to increase our professional self-worth? Collectively, but also as individuals. If we've got anyone watching this that perhaps has low self-esteem, has imposter syndrome, has difficulties with self-sabotage and doubt, you're a confident man, Matt. What do you do to increase your self-worth? But what can we do that individually? How can we do that individually? And how can we also do that collectively?
Well, individually is easier.
Is it? Oh, tell me about this.
Well, it is, because how can you say collectively we'll all do this? But
collectively is easier because you can say you don't have to bear the responsibility. You don't have to fast. You don't have to do the hard work. Individually, you have to do the hard work.
Collectively, we can't publish a single article in social work without lots of issues coming out from the other end of it.
Tell me about it.
So individually, I think it is about. And this is where it's tricky, because it is about valuing yourself and recognising. I think you've written some really interesting things about this recently. There's only one of you. your family obviously values you, and you can be replaced at work, but you can't be replaced at home. So it's really living that message out and going, do you know what, that's true.
Yeah.
There is only one of you, and years from now, what you're struggling with today at work won't really seem so important anymore. But your health and welfare will be.
Yeah.
And we want to be healthy and present in our lives, in our own lives and the lives of those people who we hold close. And to do that, it is going to be saying no to certain things at work.
Yes, the power of no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it's quite interesting as it moves from the individual into that immediate team. That can be quite difficult, because then if you say no, who's going to have to do that work and all these things? And that's where it starts to get tricky. But to a point, I'm going to use the word selfish, but I don't really think it is selfish. It is about saying, I will do this and I won't do that. Because if I do that, it will actually damage me. And I need to take care of myself.
So you establish worth by establishing boundaries.
Yes.
I like it.
So you may have to be flexible on that boundary every now and then, because the nature of the job is.
Yeah, of course. You have to have a good radar for what's an emergency and what isn't.
Exactly. And you can't treat everything as an emergency. And if everything's an emergency,
nothing
then
is.
Exactly.
Yeah. If everything's a priority, nothing is.
And so it is about setting down those your own personal boundaries. I've done quite well with that in my own career. I think in part because of, before I became a social worker, I did lots of genuinely really undervalued jobs. So lots of cleaning, car valeting, car park attendant stuff where you could just lose your job. You just turn up and you didn't have a job.
Yeah.
And you really had to fight hard to get paid. So with a couple of years of that behind me, when I was social work, I just didn't really work overtime for free, because it wasn't in my psychology by that point. It was like, no, this isn't how I work. So I'm quite rare as a social worker. So I got really kind of conditioned to work in quite a healthy way before I became a social worker.
Because you came with that work ethos and that work ethic.
Yeah, because it just wasn't natural to me to give my time away for free, because I'd have to fight so hard to get paid. Is
the other side to that, though, that the hours you have to give, you have to make sure you work hard, though? That's the flip side of that, isn't it? Because if you're going to say to your employer, well, okay, I'm only going to do 8 hours a day, you'd better make sure those 8 hours are good.
I'd expect it goes without saying. Who's putting in a bad hour's work? You know, you might.
Wow.
No, but you might.
Do you want a list? Some names.
You might end up thinking like, oh, I don't feel I got the best out of that hour, but you should be trying to get the best out of every hour.
Yeah, but you should be, but is everyone.
Who is it? How many social workers have you met who aren't? Most social workers I know are working really quite hard and as effectively. If they're not working effectively, it tends to be around the culture and the systems that they're working.
And that's what I would say. I don't think it's hard work. I think it's effective work. I think we can. Look, I'm a big advocate for time boxing. I'm a big advocate for not being on your phone. I'm a big advocate for focused work. I genuinely believe, even though it can sometimes cause problems and because there's people that can argue against me, but I've got to stick to my ideals. I genuinely believe that there are basic practices in productivity that we could instill in most workplaces that would drastically increase productivity. I do. I just think there are I look around offices and teams, there are a lot of basic things people aren't doing that they shouldn't. If we just instilled some better habits, I think we could do better. And that's kind of what I mean by that. Not necessarily the onus on the individual, but are people being taught how to make the most effective use of their time?
Yeah, I think people do that. But I think if you don't end up achieving the work, it's generally because what we're talking about
There's too much.
There's too much, or actually it's a really inefficient way to work. Like if you're copying data and data and data and writing the same thing over lots of different forms, why is that down to you to have a heart attack over? You know?
And we shall end on that fatalistic point. I like it. Boom, mic drop. Listeners and viewers, because obviously this will be going out on YouTube too. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. As always, if you can check out the stories we referred to over at mysocialworknews.com. Check out our social media channels. Let's just search Social Work News. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Do consider subscribing to this podcast if it's your first time, and also do leave a review. If you leave a review, we will read it out on next week's show. We'll be back next week, where Matt's back next week. I think the Christmas decorations may still be up. We'll see if I've taken them down yet. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.